And we just had to talk about how to be healthy about it and how that no one was upset, no one was angry that these things happen, and fortunately his siblings had been through breakups. And so he had seen what it's like, both the good and the bad. His sister had gone through a terrible breakup. A guy that she had dated for almost 12 years, they were ready to get married. He called it off 10 days before they got married.
Oh my God.
And so he saw the absolute catastrophic way a relationship can end. Sometimes I'm like, this is dad's zone, because it, but I do that with all my kids. No, this is just dad stuff and you've got to take over, or hey, we need to get brother involved here. Can you get brother on the phone? Because he needs to hear from people that, I haven't dated in 30 some years. Dad hasn't dated in 30 some years, but hey, brother just broke up with his girlfriend 6 months ago. And so to kind of find those relatability aspects, I think are really key.
Welcome back to VTime Convo. I'm Liza, and today we are diving into a topic that can feel uncomfortable for parents, but it's so important: romance, relationships, and autism. Many autistic individuals want connection, love, and partnership, but families are often unsure how to start these conversations or when to start them. I'm joined again by our guest host, Michelle.
Hello.
And Marita.
Hello.
And Chris here off to the side, who gave his consent for us to talk about him and his experiences with dating. And we are going to talk about how parents can support relationship, education, safety, independence, and emotional growth while still honoring who their child is. Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
How are you? Let's do a vibe check. How are you doing, Marita?
I'm doing fine. Still trying to get over this cold that I've had for the last 2 weeks. It was out of school for a little bit, and then now my sore throat is coming back. So I'm drinking tea this morning.
Someone asked me how I was doing, with school and stuff. I'm I'm just surviving. I'm not thriving, but I'm just surviving.
That makes sense. Yeah. Now school's tough, but I think school's tough because everything around us is getting tougher and tougher.
Yeah, well, it's different on the teacher side.
Yeah.
How are you, Michelle?
Yeah, same thing. It's almost February here tomorrow, and it's just, this is the thick of it, the school year. So, yeah surviving.
Because, I've been teaching for over 20 years. I think you've been teaching for over 20 years. And I'm, getting to the point where, some days I'm I'm just looking forward to the next vacation. And I'm when did I become that teacher that was oh my gosh, I can't wait till February break? Sometimes it's just overwhelming.
I think the demands have been increased and they add more, but they never take away from. So it's here's another thing. But what thing got removed was nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
So, and then just kids have gotten more challenging and social dynamics have made it more challenging and just everything's gotten harder.
Okay, sometimes I feel I'm is it just me? Am I becoming old and grumpy? Or is
No, they start this time of year. It's, yeah. And then we have Chris here sitting off to the side. Do you want to give us a vibe check, Chris? How are you doing today?
Pretty good.
Thanks for joining us. So today we are going to talk about romance and autism, what parents need to talk about. And that's why we have Michelle here. Thanks for coming back on, Michelle. So I guess my first big question is, what do you wish parents taught about dating?
That is it's a pretty loaded question because I don't think we all think about it. Even for my neurotypical kids, it wasn't something what do I teach them? You want that for them, but at the same time, you're it complicates things a whole lot more. With Christopher, I don't think we ever really thought about it until it kind of happened. He, like I said, was just very accepted and part of his high school community, grew up with these kids, and just kind of saw everybody else starting to do the dating thing, especially the dances. And he has older siblings, so he watched them go to homecoming and prom and all the things. And in the back of my mind, I honestly didn't know if that would be part of his life. And then he came home from school. I want to say it was his sophomore year. And he just kind of started talking about this girl and in a different way than he's talked about other girls. He's very friendly. He makes friends with everybody. In fact, one day my daughter was watching him and I was in New York with my son at the time. And she's I don't know. I just answered the door and there's 4 girls standing here in bikinis saying Christopher invited them for a swim party. And I'm wait, what? But sure enough, yes, hosting a little get together. But those were friends. But this was different. So this young lady, I definitely kind of saw just a different side of him. And there was just a romantic interest, not just to hang out, wanting to be friends, but wanted someone to date. We were very fortunate. She was just the sweetest thing. Is the sweetest thing. And yeah, they just started kind of talking a little bit more. They were still kind of young. I mean, I'm kind of a stickler mom about dating. 16 was kind of always the big magic number at our house. That was true for all of my kids. And, I knew her mom, not extremely well, but we had worked together in the past. We had a social circle. We lived in a fairly small community, so I knew her mom. And so the very first big thing they ever went to was a homecoming dance. And the kids didn't drive. They weren't old enough to drive yet. So we decided that as parents, that we would go to the same restaurant, drive them, give us a chance to kind of communicate with each other, simultaneously giving them their date. We sat at the very opposite end of the restaurant so that there wouldn't be any awkwardness to it. And really, I think that was probably one of the best things we've ever done, because we were able to kind of communicate our fears about this, and they were, able to communicate theirs. And I was able to see that this was pure, and their intentions were all positive, and they were just as, nervous and apprehensive about their daughter dating, as I was about my son dating. And so it was a really good, healthy relationship. And from there, we just kind of started deciding together as these two families navigating this situation. And they were aware of Christopher's disabilities. Like I said, they knew him. I don't think they knew him as well as they could say they know him now, because they dated for about 2.5 years. So
good.
For high school, that's forever. Yeah. And we were, when we were nervous, we knew Christopher's junior year that we would be moving to California. And we knew that she would not be moving to California. And just like all distance relationships, we knew the challenges that would come, whether you're neurotypical, neurodiverse, it's challenging regardless, especially at that age. So, we had to have those conversations about, well, what's going to happen when we move? And, they tried to do the distance thing, but just, I think it's pretty typical, not atypical, that it got more challenging, and they did break up after we moved to California.
Yeah. I got to say, so my son started dating someone junior year, beginning of junior year. But we did the same thing with the girlfriend's family. So they both were each other's first serious boyfriend, girlfriend. And then we didn't have a dinner at the same time of the date, but we did sort of talk with the parents. I think that's in general just a good idea, especially when your teens are starting to date, that we got to meet her parents, they met us, and we sort of made sure we were all on the same page. These are our boundaries. Oh, your boundaries are the same. This is great. So that both kids knew that we were all on the same page about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, we're all anxious about it. Oh, now this is more than just I kind of like you. They're
once parents are involved.
Yeah. So, but we still give them, we are not involved in their relationship, but they know that these are the guidelines. So,
right. I think establishing I will always be home when she's over, and vice versa. Just coming up with these things. And we were very fortunate that they did share. We worked from the same parameters of expectations of what was acceptable and not acceptable for a teen relationship. And so we were very blessed in that regard. And even after they broke up, we're still good friends. There was no hard feelings, or, kids grow up and they get older, and, if it's not awkward in any way, shape, or form. We don't live in the same state anymore, but we do communicate with each other still. And in fact, when I posted about his UC Davis acceptance, she was one of the first people to be like, congratulations. Yeah. We're so excited for him. It's a very positive, healthy.
Speaking of, dating and autism, there's a show on Netflix, and I'm pretty sure you're aware of the show called Love on the Spectrum. Have you seen it?
I've seen every episode. Oh my gosh. I love that show.
Yeah.
I love that show. And I mean, you can speak more to it, but the thing that I find most refreshing about that show is the way the two individuals interact with each other. And there's a lot of the relationships they focus on, they're just frank about everything. And I'm those of us who we have all these, we think about too many things. And why can't we just all be frank with each other just like that? Because it's no, I'm not interested in another date. Thank you. And there's no, like you said, no awkwardness. They just move on, and there's, you know what I mean? It's
that's how I wish it was in modern dating. As you know, I'm single, I've dated, and every time I watch the show, I'm why can't all men just be that way? Just say, hey, it's not working out, sorry. And then, and the other person's just okay.
Because there's them, from the viewer's perspective, there's not a whole lot of gameplay going on. People, I feel non-neurodivergent people, we just like, there's so much going on and you have to feel like you have to have this persona, but they're just who they are and there's no game playing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I mean, I always tell people, if you want the honest truth, ask a person with autism, because they will tell you like those jeans don't look good. Your hair looks terrible today. Like, I mean, Christopher has no filter, which is to be positive and negative. Sometimes we have to talk about that. I have watched the show. I have to say I like the beginning of the series a little bit more. I feel like all reality television, it got a little scripted towards the end, where at the beginning I felt it was much more authentic, especially like season 1. Now, season 1 and season 2 don't take place in the United States. They take place, I believe, in like Australia, like England, like European countries. And so some of the services that they speak to are not things that people have access to, like a social coach and those types of things. Like, I could pay for that. It's incredibly expensive. I don't have the financial means to provide all of that. I think they were great and I definitely listened to learn, but I don't like to give people false advice in terms of like, this is something you can expect, that someone's going to come and coach your child on how to date. That doesn't happen. Like, that comes down to me as a parent. And, fortunately, like I said, he has great siblings who coach him and guide him and all of those things. But I mean, definitely some of the things that are said and then the things they do are very, very, very real.
So, how do you deal with talking to your kids about the heartbreak and like the end of a relationship? Because, it starts off really good and happy, but I'm sure that was something that worried you as well, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, only in our case, because they had dated for so long, and they were each other's first dates. I mean, they started dating when they were give or take 15-ish. And to go through 2.5 years of high school, and they were each other's best friends. They weren't even just, as much as it was a romantic relationship, there was an authentic friendship there as well. I mean, we spent holidays together and summers, like we took her on vacation with us. I mean, this was a very, pretty intense relationship. It is intense as high school gets, but there was a lot of time. And I kind of knew in the back of my mind with us moving that it was going to be a challenge. And we just had to talk about how to be healthy about it and how that no one was upset, no one was angry that these things happen, and fortunately his siblings had been through breakups. And so he had seen what it's like, both the good and the bad. His sister had gone through a terrible breakup. A guy that she had dated for almost 12 years, they were ready to get married. He called it off 10 days before they got married.
Oh my God.
And so he saw like the absolute like catastrophic way a relationship can end. But then he saw ways that his siblings had ended. It was just kind of like, well, I'm going away to school. You're going away to school. Like, okay, we're going to still be friends, but we're not going to date anymore. So he did have some really good role models. And, his dad was very involved, or is involved. My husband, we're still married. I know. It's not like he's a third person, but yeah, we're still married. We've been married for 30 years, and sometimes I'm like, this is dad's zone, because it, but I do that with all my kids. Like, I do like some of the bigger lift because I think my special education background that like I become like the default. I'm like, no, this is just like dad stuff and you've got to take over, or hey, we need to get brother involved here. Like, can you get brother on the phone, because he needs to hear from people that, I mean, I haven't dated in 30 some years, dad hasn't dated in 30 some years, but hey, brother just broke up with his girlfriend like 6 months ago. And so to kind of find those relatability aspects, I think are really key.
So, because I know the answer, but I think people should hear so how did you talk about the birds and the bees with Christopher?
And consent and boundary.
Oh, that was a big one. So, I loved, like I said, I really do love his, I should say ex-girlfriend. That sounds just kind of strange, but ex-girlfriend's parents, like we were both like, we're aware, like I teach high school, like I don't live in a bubble and she is in the high school environment. We're not, out of the loop on the things that happen, and I loved her dad because she's like, I could trust Christopher with her anywhere, anytime, any place. I know he has good intentions. It would never hurt her. He just admired Christopher so much. And he was just like, I trust your child. He has been raised well. He has a good heart. And so that made it easier. When it came time for the actual talk, we are very fortunate that Dr. Bavone, who I think has been on your show before, is his godmother.
Hi, Suzanne.
Yes, hi. And I mean, I could not have picked better godparents. Tim and Suzanne and Suzanne and I go back to first grade together. We've been friends since very, very, very early stages of our life. So I was like, this sounds like a really good conversation for Dr. Pavone, i.e. Jesus Mom, to have. So I really just I turned that one on over to her.
I remember that. She's like, Suzanne was like, I'm gonna have to talk to my godson about this. And she's like, and she was like, what should I say? She knows what to say, but like, how do I go? I'm like, she's like, I just decided to take him for a walk around the block. And they had this very frank conversation. So I thought it was great. I wish I had Suzanne around to do that talk, but
yeah, I mean, we had a little pre-con. She's like, how far do you want me to go? I'm like, as far as you can. Like, I felt like, at the time he was 16 and I was like, you need to go to, I mean, you're a doctor. I'm going to kind of rely on your expertise, but I'm like, he needs to know it all. And like, they have such a good relationship. I mean, they're just amazing together just in every way. So it's not somebody that we see like every now and then. She's a very active part of his life. And so it was a very natural conversation in many ways. It was a difficult topic, but a natural conversation because she's such an active part of his life.
When she talks about Christopher to me, it's like, she's a proud godmother.
Yes.
She totally is.
They have matching t-shirts.
Yes. It's so sweet. They text each other. Yeah, it's so good. That is so sweet. And that's that village that you've built around yourself. And we all know Suzanne's an amazing person. So
yeah, when you pick godparents, sometimes you just pick like, I don't know, like there was definitely divine intervention having Tim and Suzanne as godparents for him, because I mean, I do know that, you do worry at some level, like what happens if I pass away when he's still only 10 or 12 and like, gosh, who would I leave him to, because his siblings now are his conservators, upon my death, his siblings conserve him. But when they were only 12, 13, I can't, like, what do I do? And who could step in and be that role that I need them to be in? Jesus Mom is perfect.
Thank you, Suzanne. So have you had that talk to any of your kids about like communication styles and like misunderstanding?
Yes, we definitely had to do that a lot, especially because Christopher is so friendly. There was times where he would be texting other girls or wanting to bring a girl flowers to school because it was her birthday or because they won the soccer tournament. And I was like, but how is your girlfriend going to feel about this? And he was just so like, more love is better love. And I'm like, yeah, but let me explain girl dynamics. Like, you have a girlfriend. And if you start bringing another girl flowers, like that's going to be a problem. And again, that's what I really relied on his siblings. His brother went to high school with him. I'm at the same, and he'd be like, you cannot do, like, do you want to end this tomorrow? Like, do that. His brother is very frank with him and was just like, so a lot of times it'd be like, well, ask Nick what you should do. Because I knew what Nick was going to say, and sometimes you have to like step out. I think, where do you find that line? I think you sometimes have to step out and let other people step in. And peers are the best teachers for kids with disabilities, not me. I can tell them all the right things to do. But at the end of the day, I'm a 55-year-old woman. He needs to hear things from a 20-something-year-old man. And so that's where his siblings play such a vital role in his life.
So you did mention that Chris has a girlfriend now.
No girlfriend now.
No girlfriend
now. I keep asking him. I mean, he just keeps telling me he's waiting till he gets to Davis. Right now, it's all eyes on getting into college.
Good answer.
Eyes on the prize. Eyes on the prize. And I think, too, knowing that he wants to go away, he's like, why am I going to start something? I'm going to Davis. So, but we definitely, in talking with the Davis team, they are one of the very first courses they take upon arrival, I think it's in their first semester, is human sexuality. And they are very just forward thinking and really promote a healthy, active social engagement, whatever that looks like. And they foster that, by having dances and both within the cohort themselves as well as with the other members of the UC Davis campus. But no, they are very much about dating is a part of life for everybody, and they want that for the kids, and I want that for him.
Yeah. So if he does get into Davis, crossing my fingers for him, will you be moving with him?
No.
He'll be going all by himself.
No, he will move by. I think that would, honestly, they would probably, not that they would they would forbid it, but that would be so frowned upon.
Counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, like the whole thing is like, they need to be away from you. They need to figure this out. Yeah, no, they live in the, he would live in the dorms anyway. So mandatory residence on campus. So 2 years in the traditional freshman, sophomore housing, and then junior and senior year in the on-campus apartments. But they're required to live on campus. I think if I told them, well, I'm going to move here, they'd be like, and he's out. Like, that would be so, like, not okay.
Like the summer camp he went to last summer was a practice one, right?
Yeah.
That is what I was supposed to,
Yeah, I think, they had told us, because, he did a great follow-up. Like, what are things I can do to improve my application for next year? Because, we've always taught of our kids, like, a no is not a no forever. It's a no for now. What do you need to do in order to prepare yourself for the next cycle? And so he sent the email, and they did say that one of the things that they were concerned about was that he had never spent an extended period of time away from his parents. So he did 10 days at camp with no cell phone, no computer, nothing. He could not communicate with us in any way. Very apprehensive. Dr. Pavone, Jesus' mom, went with us and dropped him off. But yeah, for 10 days, he was on his own. He did great. He can't wait to go again.
Oh, you're going to go again this summer?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, exciting.
So do you ever think about if Chris wanted to get married, how that would look like?
Yes, that's complicated.
Yeah.
Because, again, it goes back to like Social Security and those types of benefits. They do most likely lose their Social Security benefits upon marriage. So that's hard. Maybe in my post-teaching life, I want to work on advocacy in that space and creating policies that would allow our adults to get married. Because if he was to marry someone that made substantial income, or he started making a livable income, we lose those benefits. And we all know, what it's like. Employed today, not employed tomorrow is challenging. And so just thinking the long game, that's something that we will have to do a lot of research on in terms of setting him up for not just marriage, but, what if it doesn't go well? What if they get a divorce? I mean, those are things you have to consider in any relationship. But when you're talking about being connected to things like, Social Security and Medicare and all of those types of things, you have to be really smart about it.
What are some of your biggest concerns, with your kids dating with autism? Like, what are your most biggest concerns?
I think when he started dating this young lady, my initial concern was she was not a person with severe disability as he had. And so I was like, what's her angle? Like, is this good intent? Absolutely. She was amazing. Love her dearly. But, now we're in a new community with new people. And I always want to know that it's coming from a good place. But I think that's true of all of our kids.
Yeah.
No, typical. They're like, what's their angle? Like, do they have good intentions? It's just that Christopher's not able to necessarily monitor the way he believes everyone has good intentions, because he always has good intentions. He would never hurt anyone. That's never something he would consider. But we know that's just not the way the world works. And so being sure that the person is good of heart. And then you marry, when you marry or date someone, you do date the family. You marry the family. I've told all my kids that, like, you're going to be stuck with this person's family for the rest of your life. You need to be sure that it's going to work for you. So knowing, that he's older now and I don't have my hand in the day-to-day actions, like who he goes to school with. I've met a few of his friends at West Valley, but I don't really know them because they're young adults now. And so it changes. I think you mentioned that. You're not into their day-to-day lives anymore.
Right. No, same thing. Like, so my daughter's going to graduate from college. Same thing. Like, I've met a few of her friends, but she's talked about a lot of other friends, and like, I don't know your circle. And so it's a little tentative, like you said, do these people have good intentions? And so it's sort of like, I feel like it's akin to, we were talking about with Christopher, is that like, when you're watching this TV program and like the villain is pretty obvious, but the hero, like they're so like open-minded that they don't see the villain's like behaviors, and they don't pick up on the clues. Like, that's not a person that you should be talking to, right? So I feel like that might be some of the fears of someone, like you said, that he's so open, he just thinks the best of everybody, that he's not going to pick up on those.
Well, yeah. And when you're in high school, like, it's easy to kind of like make connections, because you essentially oftentimes are in your own neighborhood, or they're part of your church, or whatever it is. Like, it's easy to kind of find out who is in the community. College is a whole different beast. Like, kids come from all over the country, if not the world. And so you don't always know who that your child is involved with. And so that becomes a lot more challenging and worrisome.
And I think one thing, that would probably be challenging is, as someone who's dating, we know what red flags are. But with someone that has autism, would they be able to point out what a red flag is, if it's a, green flag? Like, do you worry about stuff like that too?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
And teaching him like how to, like, you can't text them 50 times. Like, you can't do that. Like teaching him like what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Again, that's that coaching component comes into play. And again, that's where I really rely on the siblings to be like, you can't text that. Like you can't post that. They really, kind of guide him in that regard. But yeah, that's definitely a challenge.
No ghosting. No ghosting, Chris. That's a no. Don't do that. So what myths about autism and romance frustrate you as a parent?
I think the myth that, and I have to say I had that myself when early on, is that because our kiddos tend to struggle more with the social end of things, that they don't want to date because dating's hard, and like they don't like people, like there's all this, I'm trying to think of the best word.
Stigma.
People have this preconceived notion of autism of like, you go back to what like, us growing up in the 80s, it was the Rain Man. Like that was when Christopher, that was the only reference point I had for autism when my kids were first diagnosed, because it goes back to like the early, 2000s when this, it's been 20 some years and things have evolved and changed. But back in the time, like I didn't know anything other than Rain Man. That was my whole understanding of autism. I mean, I have now know the vast is like so different. Like that's such a stereotypical way of looking at things. But so I think the myth that them not wanting to date is something that people buy into because it's difficult and challenging. But they're just like everybody else. Like everybody wants to date. Everybody wants companionship. Everybody wants to be, romance and to have, an authentic relationship. So it looks different, but it is not from a lack of desire.
I think that's what's so great about the Love on the Spectrum programs, as like just a person who does it only has limited experience. So like grew up in the 80s, and yes, Rain Man was my only experience. But as a teacher throughout my 20 years, I've actually seen the different variations of what autism looks like, right? So like I'm like, oh, it's not the Rain Man. It's this kid. I had this one kid who would just blurt out stuff, and and then I had another kid who would like just be very anxiety about it and not say anything, to another kid who's just like, I don't know. It was just like this. You see the full spectrum. It's not always just about social interactions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because I think the hardest thing with autism is it doesn't have a physical, like if you have a child with Down syndrome, like there's a physical look to their disability. Christopher, people will say, well, he doesn't look autistic. I'm like, what is it? What is that even like? Yeah. Is like, did I miss that part of my like parenting and education? Like, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Or he doesn't sound like he has autism. Well, you're an expert now. Like, I don't know what that means. Can you give me some context for that? Because there is, I think, this misconception of what autism looks like. And it falls back on things that are portrayed in the media.
I think it's, I'm going to go back to that TV show. So like there was, I can't remember what it was. It's just like, there's nothing like wrong with anybody with autism. They just see the world differently is what I thought they said. And so like, there's all these words going on. So is neurodivergent better, or is autism better? Or like neurodivergent, autism, like is autism in like umbrella?
Yeah, it's in the umbrella, yeah. Okay. Because, ADHD is neurodiverse, yeah. So I think it's just that neurodiverse is that bigger umbrella. And then, but again, you can have just the way autism presents itself, the way it presented to my two kids looks very different. I mean, I've got one living in New York, gets on the subway every day. He just puts in his earbuds. He's good to go. He dates a ton. He didn't date in high school a lot. I think he was still trying to, just navigate. And, I think it's just hard. We lived in a pretty small town. Everybody knew everybody. And that he was just like, I don't know. He didn't date a ton. But then since he moved to New York, he's been in several long-term relationships, dates quite a bit. So I think it just looks different for everybody and how they bloom in their own time.
Well, do you have any advice for any parents that have kids that are dating on the spectrum?
I mean, I think it's the same advice I would have for all parents.
Yeah.
On the spectrum or not on the spectrum. I think it depends too on their age. Definitely the way I would approach things when they were in high school looks a lot different than now that all my kids are over the age of 20. Just open communication with them, knowing that, there's things that sometimes you want to hear and some things that you need to hear that aren't always easy to hear. And you're like, okay, did I need to hear that? But just knowing that you're a safe place for them. And then just talking to them, I think as a society, we have moved away from typical dating, online dating and DMing and all these things like are such nuances to this generation that we didn't grow up with, and teaching them how to be respectful to each other and in their dating life is so important, because it's really easy to be a keyboard warrior and hide behind the screen and think you're in a relationship, and it's different. So I think just really building authenticity with your kids and teaching them how to build that into their relationships is really key.
Yeah, because I don't know. I've seen the full gamut of online dating, and how like I've seen very successful relationships that they're married and have children now, to like my own daughter. She's like the first couple of people she dated because she met them online. And I jokingly said that, she dated a lot of crazy. But now this person that she's dating right now, she first met them in person and interacted with them. And like, I haven't seen her. She seems the happiest I've ever seen her. So it's just the same thing you would say to all parents who are trying to help their adult children navigate social interactions. It's just like, you just gotta like, only when advice is asked do I give it. Because she's not living under my roof anymore. Even though we still help support her, I'm like, I have to respect that she's an adult. And from my own personal experience, my parents really tried to like micromanage me even as an adult. So I'm like, I'm going to try to make sure that she knows that I'm going to support her, whatever choices she makes, good or bad.
Yeah. And my kids are all older than I was. I mean, I was married at 24, and started dating my husband when I was 22. So like, they're all like beyond that. Like they're 29 and 27. Christopher's my youngest at 20. So I was already married at their age. And in case of my daughter and my son, like I'd already had a kid in some cases too. So, they're just in very different places. Kids today are having, getting married later, dating differently. Yeah, it's very different. And I think too, this was in Arizona. It's very different than in California. So navigating those social networks does become a little bit more challenging.
Well, thank you, ladies, for joining me this morning. Thanks, Marita and Michelle. Everyone have a good day.